One of you asked me the other day about programs and teams that didn't necessarily make the playoff, and maybe they're not playing in the biggest bowl games, but they're just programs that you feel good about right now. Which ones are trending in the right direction? In other words, which ones will you really be focused on in 2023? Florida State football has to be chief among them. See what I did there? Yes, indeed, Mike Norvell and company, while everyone's been talking about recruiting and everyone's been talking about all the noise that always comes out of the state of Florida. I talk about the state of Florida all the time. This team right here, they beat LSU in week 1 this past year. And Colin, I'm going to ask you to do something that's unprofessional because we got a nice, fancy graphic here on the screen right now, and he just put it up, and there's no way you had time to read it all. But I'm going to request Florida State's schedule graphic for just a second because I want to illustrate something to you. Thank you, Colin. So they start off 4-0. There's a 3-game stretch there. It's almost like a flat tire in the middle of the season. They lost to Wake, NC State, and Clemson. All the games were competitive, and then they get right back on the horse, and they throttle everyone. They were playing really, really good ball down the stretch. It culminated with that night after Thanksgiving, that Friday game against Florida, and they finished 9-3, and I remember being on the Florida State 24/7 board right before the season. I said, what would be good enough? Everyone wanted 8 wins. Well, they got 9 wins. But more importantly, they got Jordan Travis back. They just got Jaheim Bell, the tight end from South Carolina. I think now they've reached that critical point. Mike Norvell's reached that critical point at Florida State where he's no longer having to just beg and plead for people to believe in him. Now he's got, was that some Jimbo Fisher FSU B-roll? I know you didn't mean to, but I love it. Boy, that's a long time ago. So Mike Norvell feels to me like he's reached that point now where he's not having to beg. He's not having to say, hey, wait till you see what we can do. They can point to this last season and say, that's sort of a precursor. We're not saying we're where we want to be yet, but how can you not feel good about Florida State going into 2023? And here's the other thing. It's not a lot. It doesn't feel like smoke and mirrors to me, or smoking mirrors, as some of my buddies would say. They took time and they rebuilt the inner core of the football program there. They could have microwaved it. They could have popcorn and candy, cotton candied it. Yeah, the cotton candy approach. But that's just a sugar high. No, they went nutrition first. They went chicken. They went steak. They went meat and potatoes. And it's starting to pay off. So I feel good about Florida State. Speaking of Florida State, the team that they beat to begin this past regular season, LSU. Feel good about LSU too. You could really look at that SEC championship game one of two ways. You could either take, I think, the dumbed down approach of saying, look at them. Look at them. They got beat by Georgia. They got owned by Georgia. I knew they were frauds. They never should have been there. Well, they weren't frauds. By the very definition of divisional play, the team with the best divisional record goes to play for the conference title game. They're not frauds. No one ever said they were better than Georgia. So anyway, that's the outlier. I would suggest you say to yourself, like I'm saying to myself, they were in Atlanta to begin with? They beat Alabama in year 1? And mind you, that was supposed to be one of the best Bama teams in recent history. I believed it. And so I also believed Bama was going to beat LSU comfortably. Well, they did neither of those things, and that's year 1 under Brian Kelly. Here was the other concern that some had. I didn't necessarily fall in this camp, but some were concerned about the old acclimation period for Brian Kelly. How long was it going to take him? I'm not going to keep rubbing this in. It's just something we happened to pinata out of the way early on that some other folks held on to a little too long. Brian Kelly came to LSU and I think put on a little different face. And it's a face that he never wore at Notre Dame. I'm not saying he's two-faced. What I'm saying is I think, this is the feel I get. I'm not saying he wasn't a hard worker at Notre Dame. I'm saying there were some avenues in recruiting he knew he couldn't go down, so he never bothered to. Because he didn't want to run into a brick wall over and over again. That would have been a waste of his time. Well, some folks, I think, misconstrued that, and they took it to mean he was never interested in going down those recruiting avenues. I think he always was interested in it. He just knew it was going to be fruitless at one place, and now he can do it. And he's doing it. And so he's been completely dialed in. You haven't even heard a whisper of that guy not being totally dialed in recruiting. Completely opposite, actually. I had a hiccup, sorry. Complete opposite. So I feel good about LSU because, look, they are just at the very, very outset of remaking that program into what they want it to be under him. So I feel good about LSU. Jesse's in the building, so I had to insert the following. I feel good about Penn State. Notice I have to lower the tone a little bit because that's what the last half of their season felt like. They lost to Michigan. They lost to Ohio State. Season's over, right? Well, for a lot of the country, that's when people tuned out from Penn State. And I know it's nothing to write home about, but a lot of teams would have kind of mailed it in there because their preseason goals are out the window. Well, Penn State didn't. I believe in giving credit when people do what they're supposed to do. So they did what they were supposed to do the rest of the way. They played like Florida State did the rest of the way. Now, you could skeptically look at that and say, well, yeah, but, I mean, look who they played. Well, that's the point. They did what they were supposed to do. And there was never an ounce of quit. There was never an ounce of give up. And so if you want to criticize the modern day player for doing that more and more, don't you have to credit the modern day player at Penn State for not doing that? So that's part one. Part two is we know what's about to happen at quarterback. We know that it is the Drew Aller era. It is upon us now. Can't tell you how many days I've walked in this building, and producer Jesse has told me, you could pick whatever you want to, whether it is inferior passing statistics, world hunger, whatever it is, it's all going to be solved when Drew Aller is at the helm. Quarterback, Penn State. Well, he's about to be. And so they finished 10-2 this year. Fourth 10-plus win season since 2016. Program's fine. Trending in the right direction. Should be getting prepared to have some of the best quarterback play they've had under James Franklin. Feel good about Penn State right now. TCU. I know it's pretty obvious because they're in the playoff at the moment. I don't think this is a one-hit wonder sort of program. It certainly has been a big hit right off the bat, but have you been paying attention to what they've been doing in recruiting? I think they're sitting at number 16 right now, just in the overall recruiting rankings. JoJo Earl, the Bama wide receiver transfer, just committed there. I know they're in it for a couple other guys. So Sonny Dykes really, really quickly is turning TCU into a destination program. And remember how this could not have come at a more opportune time for TCU and for the Big 12, frankly. Because what are we talking about right now? If you go to CBSSports.com or 24/7 Sports, a lot of the headlines about the Big 12 are about when Texas and OU are going to leave. And they just renegotiated their TV deal. Well, guess what helped greatly in that department? Someone not named Texas or Oklahoma playing really good ball this year. In fact, a couple of programs out there, TCU just among them. Well, here's the next question. In this brave new Big 12, the post-OU, post-Texas Big 12, which is about to be upon us, it's going to be a lot of air out there for someone to take up in that conference. Why not the program that's parked right smack dab in the middle of Dallas, Texas? TCU is well positioned. They got the right guy. They are a destination for recruits and for transfers. A lot of kids are just flat out from that area. So kids, it's kind of like the South Florida effect. Some kids leave home initially, and you happen to be the benefactor just for the sake of a kid wanting to move closer to home. Sometimes kids will move closer to home, and you just happen to be the program that's closest. You didn't even really do anything. You just happen to be a pinpoint on a map. So there's a lot going right for TCU right now. And lastly, this one is pretty obvious too, but I want to recognize them, USC. I think some people are taking the same incorrect tact on USC as they are LSU when they look at them and they say, oh, look at them, they got exposed in the Pac-12 championship game. They shouldn't have been in the Pac-12 championship game if you say it out loud. I know what the Vegas odds said, and I know that you recalibrated your expectation once they got in the season. Forget about the name Lincoln Riley. Forget about the name Caleb Williams. Just say the situation out loud. They fired a coach, they hired the new one, and they completely overhauled the roster. That shouldn't be a formula to win a Pac-12 championship or to be in position to play for one, but they were. So that's just a whole lot of gravy for year one is what I'm saying. They will have teams on the field over the next several years that would run this team out of the building, that they just put on the field. I believe that. And that's even with Caleb Williams at the helm. And look, they may have won the Pac-12 championship game as is if he stayed healthy. I've been going back and forth, unnecessarily so, by the way, with Utah fans. And I don't get it. It's like I'm not taking credit away from Utah. They beat them once, they beat them twice, 2 years in a row, they've beaten a team twice to win the Pac-12 championship. All I'm saying is when USC has a 17-3 lead with the healthy quarterback and he stays healthy, it might have been a different game than the one where you went on a 44-7 run to end things. That's all I'm saying. That's pretty innocent, I think. So USC, I believe in. But look, the Pac-12 was the toughest conference for me. I could have put Oregon here. I could have put both teams in Oregon. I could have put Washington. UCLA's making a little noise, both in recruiting and in the transfer market, which could have the volume turned up on it a little bit later this week. We'll see, ... Keep an eye on that. Jed Fish at Arizona, I feel good. So I could have done like a Pac-12 only segment, as would be customary for Pac-12 Pate. But nope, the last thing I want on this show, and it's bitten me, you guys know, it's bitten me too many times. The last thing I want to be called is a Pac-12 homer. I've heard it my whole life, and so I got to give some love to the SEC. I got to throw some crumbs to the Big Ten. Can't just let them call me a Pac-12 homer. I can't tell you how frequent that was thrown my way in West Central Georgia growing up. Guys, thanks for watching Late Kick. Make sure to leave a comment. I love interacting with you. But most of all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep all of this free.